Okay, Turkey. In Turkey we have more than 257 PPP projects, and the amount is around $75 billion project contract value, and the project investment costs more than $160 billion last 15 years. So, and those projects were in transport, and the biggest PPP agreement in the world, actually, it was the single contract. It was the Istanbul new airport. The amount was $35 billion, and it was the biggest PPP. So what we actually reached in Turkey in terms of public PPP investment by public investment, it's around government by 2030 increase this investment to the 30% of all public investment for the PPP projects. What we have in Turkey, which projects actually? We have some motorway projects, 9 motorway and tunnel projects. The contract signed last 15 years, the total length more than 1,000 kilometers, and the total investment cost $22.8 billion. And those, most of them are now on the operation phase. And there are 2 motorway projects are on the construction phase. Airport project, as I mentioned, the first phase of Istanbul Airport, the largest PPP for Turkey, implemented in 2018, $35 billion projects. And also we have 20 airports with PPP in Turkey in different cities. So, but the most actually today, what I would like to share, the PPP projects of the city hospital in the healthcare. So I would like to split social infrastructure and the commercial infrastructure. So today I would like to stress on the social infrastructure, like healthcare projects. In Turkey, we have a story, a really cool story of the PPP city hospital projects. It was started in 2005, and now we reach more than 20,000 beds of a city hospital have been tendered, and the 13 were on the operation phase and the 5 are on the construction phase. But by 2021, I think all those 5 will be completed. And at the end of the 2021, we will reach more than 28,000 beds in Turkey, which were managed by the PPP projects. What was the reason of the healthcare projects? Actually, the most important point was the infant mortality rate in 2005, and it was really under the below of OECD range and healthcare services. It was 2005. So as I mentioned, 18 projects contracts signed. The total capacity is 28,000 beds, and the total investment cost around $10.8 billion. And most of these investment costs actually invested by the foreign investors and MDBs and IFIs, the local state hospitals, managed and invested by international players. So now, after the PPP pipeline, healthcare pipeline stories, the Turkey reached 30,000 beds and 20,000 rooms and more than 5,000 intensive care units and 1,000 surgery rooms and 13 city hospitals last 5 years. Why I am actually giving those numbers? Those are financed and invested by the private party, but those are not the private hospitals. Those are the state's hospitals, and the people who are using this hospital doesn't pay any extra or any additional payment to the hospital. So it's a totally pure public services which can operate by the private parties, which is really important. And those 13 hospitals are not focused on Istanbul, Ankara, or Izmir, which are the biggest cities of Turkey. Or it's a spread all over the Turkey. So different 13 cities. Turkey now has the PPP project. But what is unique for this story? Actually, we can see some healthcare projects in Canada, in Australia, in UK, in Spain as well. The official delegation by the Minister of Health to the Spain, and the idea comes from the Spain experience. It was 2005, but what makes the Turkish PPP story unique is now it's really interesting. The major medical services are managed by the public, and the other services managed by the private companies. So you can see both private and public officials at the same hospitals, and they are working together. Now I will tell you the services which are under the responsibilities of private party. The first one is the land and the building services. I mean the construction, which is the very unique for the PPP projects, and the construction made by the private party and the private finance, and maintenance as well for 25 years, because the contract are 3 years construction and 25 years operation. So totally contract duration was 28 years, and 25 years the maintenance also managed by the private parties. The common services management, this is not the administrative facilities, this is the common services management of the hospitals. And the third one is furniture services. So those are furnished hospitals. The government requested the furnished hospitals with the medical equipments as well. So, and the ground and the garden maintenance services. So it's also including in the maintenance services. These 5 services managed by the private parties, but in the hospital, when the story comes, the hospital, what we have under the responsibility of private parties, the first one is laundry, catering, laboratory, imaging, sterilization, rehabilitation, waste management, disinfection, car parking, cleaning services, hospital information management, which is very important, security services, and patient guidance. So those 19 services also managed and operated by the private companies, which is very important. Now comes to the administrative things. As I mentioned, the major medical services driven by the government. So the government sent the doctors and the nurses only, and the doctors and the nurses get their salary from the Ministry of Health. But the other services managed by the private party. So how the private party gets their the investments. So there are 3 paths of revenue stream for the private party in the PPP city hospital in Turkey. The first one is the availability payment, which is a fixed amount, and the Minister of Health guaranteed that I will pay you a fixed amount, let's say it's a rent, fixed amount to the private party who invested in the hospital for 25 years. It's a fix, and there is an indexation for the inflation, but not indexation for the currency in the availability payment. So the private party knows that 25 years, how much they will get from the government as an availability payment. The second important stream is the service payment. Service payment is also very important, and those services that I indicated, the government, the public sides paid to the private party for the service based. Some of them are volume based, some of them are non-volume based. So volume based, how much the private party deliver the service, they will get the payment at the end of 3 months. So there are 3 payments in a year the private party gets from the public as a service payment. So the second one is the service payment. The first one is availability payment, and the second one is the service payment revenue for the private party. And the third one is commercial revenues, because these are city hospitals and the lands are excessive. So places for the people, for the patient, and for the relation of the patient. So also they can get some commercial revenues from the hospitals. So in that case, the private party invested for 28 years, 25 years for the operation, 3 years for the construction, and get back their investment in three ways: availability payment, service payment, and the commercial revenues from the hospital management process. Here, I would like to also give some very important insight about to leave it back, because the service payment is the mainstream of the private parties revenue. And so the 70% of each service payment were guaranteed by the government in the beginning of the contract. So the private party, when they are preparing for the tender, they know they will get the first very guaranteed fixed amount as an availability payment. And when they will deliver the service in a good way, in a right way, and in the level of the KPIs, so they will get minimum 70% revenue from each service. And when it goes to up to from 70%, so they will get also this revenue from the government. But again, I would like to repeat it, this, which is very important, I believe. So the people who are using this hospital, who are going to this hospital, they are not paying anything to the private party or the public side. So these hospitals' budget comes from the national budget, from the Ministry of Health. So key attraction of projects, because what I told, more than 70% of this investment came from abroad, and the foreign investor invested in Turkish healthcare PPP projects. So do the government needs the attraction for this investment to the healthcare? Because the main reason was, as I mentioned, the main reason was increasing the public services in Turkey and reaching the OECD standards in the public hospitals. So the internal saving didn't enough for making new infrastructure at that time. So the government needs the foreign investment, the MDBs, the commercial banks, the international banks. So they should put something on the table for the attraction of the investment. What is the key attraction of this program? The first one is adjustment against inflation and foreign exchange, which is very important for the availability payment, the rent. The inflation indexation is applied by the government. For the service payment, not inflation, but the currency indexation is applied by the government. So the private companies have been secured by the inflation, against the inflation and against the currency indexation. This is very important. And variation order, also this is an attraction. So the government has a right to variation order during the construction phase, but there is a limitation for the ministry and the ministry itself, and up to the 20% the government can change, can apply. There's a VAT exception for the capex. This is very also unique. The market testing for services every 5 years for the medical equipments, the government deliver a market testing for services, and each 5 years the government would like to keep the technological progress in the services. So every 5 years goes to the market test, gets the prices, and negotiate with the private companies who is operating the hospital, and those medical equipments which should renew every 5 years, again by the government, from the private parties, from the operators. And protection against the change in law, So this is also very important. In the morning, we discussed about the legislation, the importance of the legislation. So the protection against the change in law. So it means that the government cannot say, okay, I changed the legislation, so it was like that, but from now on it will be like that. So it didn't happen like that. So there is a very huge, very strong protection against change in law, even in the pandemic. So I will give some information, some experience from the pandemic process uh, mm, as well. So the lenders sign direct agreements with the Ministry of Health, which is also very important for the attraction of the government, because you know, the finance comes from the international banks, MDBs, and they finance the private company. But what happened actually, the MDBs and the IFIs would like to feel a secure platform for financing your infrastructure projects, and they would like to sign a direct agreement, which is a three-party agreement. One side the government, the other side the private party, and the other side the banks. But what it means, what these lenders sign the direct agreements gives to the lenders, they can change, they can step in the projects, which is very important. So if the SPV, special purpose vehicle, who is the responsibility for the operation and the construction, if they are not good on the performance of construction and the operation as well, and they cannot be able to pay the loans they should give to the lenders, they can discuss with the ministry, they can negotiate with the Ministry of Health, and they can change the SPV. So they have a step in right, which is very important, because the main reason of increasing the public services means that there are listed KPIs that the government would like to monitor, would like to measure the public services. If those public services quality don't match with the KPIs, the government and the lenders can step in to the projects. And some of incentives for PPP projects also, which are quite important, attracting the lenders and the international players to the healthcare projects. One is step in right, as I mentioned, the revenue guarantee, which is very important, tax incentives, that assumption means that treasury guarantee. So if the ministry cannot be able to pay, cannot be able to provide the guaranteed, so there is also a mechanism, a backbone mechanism, that assumption by the treasury of Turkish government. And the last one is the land, the proper land, also given by the public side to the private party. It's proper and ready for the construction. So the land comes from the government in a ready situation, and the private company take the land and start the construction. So I cannot show some pictures from here, but I would like to give some experience, some numbers from the hospitals. For example, in Istanbul, there is a Başakşehir Çamsakura PPP city hospitals. It's around 25,000 beds, and which is quite big, and totally more than 5,000 permanent employment are under the umbrella of the hospitals, and totally around 50,000 daily users come to the hospital, and the operation made by the government. So sometimes the people ask us how those private employees and the public employees are working at the same roof, which is very critical actually, because the private companies employees are earning more money than the public side, so there is a conflict or something. It's a very important question. Actually, private companies employees, based on the performance of their capabilities, but the public side, they have an agreement with the public. It's a long-term, 25 years, so they earn maybe less, but they have a long-term contract, and it didn't happen any problem so far. But also, before I close the session, because I don't want to go more from my time. There is a conflict resolution mechanism also in the hospitals, in the PPP hospital, which is also very important because the doctors and the nurses and the officials are working together with the private companies employees, and also there is always a chance to some conflicts between private and the public. So how they solve the problem, because they are delivering the healthcare services, which is important, and you cannot stop it. Even 1 minute you cannot stop it. So how the system find the solution internally. So there is a steering committee, 3 from the government, 3 from the private party. The head of steering committee is the head of the hospital, is a doctor, and the co-head is from the private party, is the manager of the hospitals. And all conflicts weekly discussed in the steering committee. If this steering committee cannot find a way to solve the problem, so this problem goes to the ministry. And there is also a debate committee there in the ministry, and with the private party also discuss with the ministry. But so far, I think in 13 hospitals, I know all those problems, conflicts, have been solved in the steering committee. But as an experience, as a Turkish PPP experience, what I can also share with my colleagues from MENA, 3 public side and 3 private side, there's an equal people in the steering committee, but the head of this committee is the government. So I actually advise that this not be like that. Maybe there is some advisor, internal independent advisor in the committee, because many times the government, still the government are the paying side, and the private part occurs on the hospital. Actually, at one point, the private party can go away, but the public who are the payer actually, so decide the solution. So I think there is one independent advisor will be great on the steering committee, which is responsible for the solution of the conflict. So as lessons learned from Turkish PPP, generally PPP stories, not the healthcare stories, what I can share with you, the first one is the institutional capacity, regulatory, project preparation, tendering. This is tremendously important process for a successful PPP projects, because we know that 15 years ago, it was horrible to learn, to see the new progress, the new development, new conflicts, and try to solve all these one. But now, after 15 years, we have different institutional capacity in the, under the umbrella of different line ministries, so which is very important. So some countries we advise there should be a PPP unit who has the institutional capacity to coordinate, to monitor, to measure the process for the PPP projects. The second one is legal framework. After 15 years, really as a personal, I believe in the legal framework, the importance of legal framework for the PPP projects. Also in healthcare projects in Turkey, we should wait approximately 3 years from 2007 to 2011 for a proper PPP projects. Even the tenders were launched and some of them awarded. We should wait for the proper legal framework for 3 years to start the construction of those hospitals. And the planning in advance, the feasibility studies of the government. I think this is the most important for the part of the government. Actually, for a successful PPP project from the government side, we should expect only the first thing is a planning in advance, the feasibility studies, because the people after the construction and the operation, the people starts why you decided this infrastructure and you didn't decide that infrastructure. So to close those discussion, to reply to those discussion, the government needs a very strong feasibility studies. The private company has a feasibility studies, should have a feasibility studies, and the lenders also should have feasibility studies, but the government side is at the first rank. in two minutes, I'm wrapping up. So I will close the session. One is the realistic determination of risks. So not write on the list, this is the risk, these are the second list, the third list. No, should be a realistic determination of risks. And we need a proper risk allocation. All the time we discuss this risk allocation between the parties. But maybe the last, not the least, which is very important for a successful PPP project, is the PR of the projects. Not leave this PR process at the end of the construction or during the operation. Please focus on, all of us, please focus on from the beginning. We should have the governance with the people, with the private party, with the lenders, with the banks, and be aware of the people, what the government will make this infrastructure as and why as a PPP projects.